War doesn't determine who is right, only who is left. Every war is an attack on humanity as a whole, and every invasion into the sovereignty of another country should be condemned. Welcome to the Pep Talk. This is Sibi Satyan. Before deep diving into the political and the economical reasons of Russia-Ukraine crisis, I request every one of you to subscribe, like, comment and share. Now the world is on the brink of a big war. The Russia-Ukraine crisis has been escalated to the next level with the Russian forces invading into the Ukrainian territory, and Russia is now threatening Europe with its nuclear arsenal. Thousands of Indians, including students, are stranded in Ukraine, and one of them has already lost his life in a blast. India is trying its best to evacuate its citizens from the war-affected regions. But anyway, the invasion happened. Since it's Russia, it is called an invasion. If it were the US, it would have been called liberation. All the Western media would have shouted how America liberated Ukraine. And we know how they liberated Iraq and Afghanistan in the recent times. Anyway, every war has a political and a commercial side too. Let's try to decode what is actually happening between Russia and Ukraine and the role of America as well. For understanding it better, let's take the example of our neighboring country, Nepal. We are in good relations with them. And in one fine morning, we come to know that China has signed a military pact with Nepal, and in exchange, Nepal is allowing them to set up a military base in Kathmandu or somewhere close to the Indian border. How India will react? Of course, our country will be terrified and will take necessary action to preempt such threats. For Russia, the situation is even graver. Ukraine was a part of the larger USSR, as you know. Even after the fall of USSR, Russia used to keep very good relations with the Ukrainian governments. 30% of the total population in Ukraine are Russian-speaking. Russia and Ukraine share the same legacy. 2014, a turning point between Ukraine and Russia. 2014 changed everything. America exercised its influence in Ukraine, and the pro-Russian government was replaced by a pro-Western government. America was persuading many former Soviet republics to join the NATO, and Ukraine would be their jackpot. Ukraine shares the longest border with Russia, and any such move would be a disaster to the defenses of Russia, because a NATO membership allows the US to set up a military camp or the deployment of missiles in Ukraine. As we know, NATO and Warsaw treaties were formed during the Cold War era. At the end of the Cold War, and at the end of the USSR, and at the end of the Warsaw Treaty, there was one thing Russia demanded America, that the NATO should be disbanded. America didn't heed to this request. Instead, they tried to add more members to NATO and came closer to the borders of Russia. Many former Russian republics were joined with the NATO. For example, the Baltic countries such as Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. The US increased their trade relations with Ukraine, increased their military funding, which made Ukraine the fourth largest recipient of it. The US tried to stop the growing influence of Russia across Europe by using Ukraine as a pawn. The hidden aggression of the US put Russia in a tight spot. We know the Russian President Vladimir Putin is a dictator who doesn't mind to send the opposition to prison or gives a damn about the privileges of democracy or the human rights of people in his own country. Above all, regaining the old glory of the USSR remains to be one of the biggest dreams of him. For Putin, Ukraine government joining hands with the West is a good opportunity to attack them, and he got it in a platter. But at the same time, the US was also showing weaknesses for some time, such as the withdrawal of its troops from Afghanistan, which didn't go unnoticed by Russia. This weakness, along with the hostility of Ukrainian government and the economic security of $630 billion of foreign reserve they earned through trade, has created the perfect timing for Vladimir Putin to call the shots. Russia ensured the support of China as well before the drastic step, which is not a good news for us Indians. Russia warned Ukraine many times post 2014, but Ukraine was reluctant to heed those. In 2014, Russia liberated Crimea from Ukraine, citing persecution of Russian speakers in that region. Russia supports separatist movements in Donbas area, in the regions of Donetsk and Lugansk, and engages in a proxy war with Ukraine. The standoff between two countries has got at least 14,000 people killed before the present invasion, according to estimates. All these muscle tactics of Russia made Ukraine closer to America. Why America stayed away from the war? Ukraine somehow believed that the US and the NATO would come for their aid if there is a direct military aggression from Russia. Unfortunately, the Ukrainian government failed to read the fact that the US would not want a direct military conflict with Russia. Actually, the Ukrainian government under the less experienced Zelensky failed to understand that the US wanted this war badly between Russia and Ukraine because they wanted to use sanctions against Russia to cripple them financially. The US wanted to show the European Union countries that Russia is an unreliable ally who cannot provide uninterrupted supply of energy to them. Basically, it was fear of the growing influence of Russia across Europe. Here comes the trade and business side. It will be discussed in the next video, which will be released tomorrow itself. See you in the part 2 of Russia-Ukrainian crisis. CB Satyan signing off.